I want to welcome an old friend of the program. We've known her for years, followed her work for years, which has been extraordinary. But she's got a project that's relatively new that you all ought to know about because it's super important to actually winning. We like to do that still, don't we, fellas?
Yeah.
Winning?
Winning's good.
Winning usually is better than losing.
I am not tired of winning because we've done some losing recently.
And that doesn't seem
it doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't feel that great. So our guest is Jessica Anderson. You may remember her from Heritage, and we've talked a lot about her work when she was at Heritage, but she's got a new thing, relatively. It's launched in April, and it's Sentinel Action Fund. And this thing is dedicated to all the right stuff. I'm not going to overshoot what you're going to represent here by trying to characterize it, but thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I mean, let's talk about the important work, though.
Well, we have our work cut out for us. Winning back the Senate is not going to be easy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of headwinds that are in our favor. It's a presidential year. People are focused on the map. It's a small map. We're not talking about like 15 states to win here. It's really, can we get 2, maybe 3 to flip? Montana, Ohio, West Virginia just made itself a little bit easier for us.
Sure did.
Praise the Lord on that one.
Yeah, no kidding.
We got a huge fight in Pennsylvania. And I think what we've learned over the last 3 cycles is that if you don't invest and understand the grassroots and the need for a permanent ground game, we will keep losing.
Yeah.
So I've been at Heritage Action for 10 years. It was an amazing time to work there, to work in the grassroots. I started from the bottom as a state director and left as the executive director. And so can truly say, having worked at every part of the organ in the grassroots, that people in this country...
it all.
Yeah, and people in this country are fired up.
Yeah.
I mean, they want to see elected officials do what they said they were going to do. Mm-hmm. And they'll show up for you, right? They will turn out and vote, but you got to make it easy for them. Mm-hmm. And so for Republicans, that means that we have to start utilizing every single tactic in the toolbox.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absentee ballot.
Yeah.
Early vote.
Yeah.
Ballot harvesting.
Yeah.
We got states where ballot harvesting is legal, and Republicans have been sitting on the sidelines because we don't think it's the right thing to do. I don't think it's the right thing to do. Of course, we should fight to
if we can outlaw it, we
state
would.
Laws. Yeah.
Right.
And let's fight to change those state laws in the states where ballot harvesting exists. But in the meantime, let's use the rules that exist to our favor and get these grassroots activists off of the sidelines and engaged year-round in their communities, turning people out. We don't have the unions, right? We don't have that, so we have to build it.
Yeah.
And that's what Sentinel Action Fund is doing.
And there are some states that are more familiar with non-election day voting, with early voting. We worked in Arizona, and I know Michael will tell you chapter and verse about how important early voting
Permanent
has been
early
to
voter
us.
list.
We worked on the last one that won.
Yeah.
We did.
Remember that? Remember when winning was possible?
I do. It seems like a long time ago.
But you got to the point in a place like Arizona where you were pretty confident you won the election before Election Day. Right? Because there was that permanent early voter list, and people got mailed their ballots, and Republicans used to go out there and try to win those votes.
We used to be a lot better than them at this.
Yeah, that's right. We actually used to do this so much better a decade ago. But then the inverse happened, right? In Pennsylvania, Lord love him, John Fetterman. What was the most Googled search engine search the day after the Fetterman-Oz debate was, how do I change my vote?
Yeah.
They had already voted. The election was done. He was 700,000 votes behind the morning of Election Day. There was no way for Oz to overcome that.
Yeah.
So we have to flip the switch. We have to go back to the basics. Get the early vote list, the absentee permanent list, all these new people that have moved from California because they're leaving, the crazy Newsom state, and they're moving into Montana. Well, they're going to be prime for the Senate race that's in Montana. They're moving into Georgia. They're moving to Florida. I mean, these are the types of people that we need to capture. We need to register them to vote, and then chase that all the way through to Election Day.
Yeah, I mean, look, what I like so much about what you're doing with Sentinel that contrasts itself with whole bunch of things in our movement is you've actually spent time in the field and you've done it, and you've learned lessons along the way, and you're putting these things into practice. Everyone under the sun after 22 wanted to talk about, well, Republicans need to be ballot harvesters now. And so we're going to raise $100 million to a whole bunch of people who've never done that before. And magic. We're going to do it. It's more complicated than that.
It is. And every state is different, right? Every state has a different set of laws and rules that govern how we actually engage. And every state also has a different period of early voting, right? Mm-hmm. You look at what we just did in Virginia that Governor Youngkin did, and he really led the effort. I think this is the first time you actually saw an elected official champion the ABEV, absentee ballot early vote program. He embraced it. He would have lost way more had he not have. I mean, this is completely. Like a 26% lift of voter turnout in an off year in Virginia.
26%?
Lift.
Holy cats.
So, like, if you can take that program, that model of absentee ballot early vote, and now let's export it into a battleground state, you're winning by the margins.
Yeah, you know, it's funny that you mentioned this because we've covered this in the program before. Everybody that was following tangentially what was happening in Virginia was doing it based on expectations of you win or you lose. They were dealing with a whole bunch of very blue.
Yes, it's a blue state.
Yeah.
Biden won by 10.
Right. And so like a 26% lift and then getting within an eyelash.
That's right.
Of majorities there was a massive accomplishment.
And all credit goes to the governor for actually recognizing that this mattered, pulling the outside effort together, harnessing, and Virginia has unique laws because you can coordinate. There can be coordination amongst the outside groups, and you can have that hard dollar, soft dollar. So that means like the traditional campaign spending plus the outside groups really working together. So you're not double block walking and you're not hitting the same voters twice and you're really doubling your effort and resources. That's the lesson we need to learn. And as far as I'm concerned, that needs to be the new normal.
Yeah.
That's the new normal. If we're going to win back the Senate, we got to start earlier. And it's got to have this focus on grassroots ground game. Sentinel Action Fund is going to play a huge part of that. We're going to help coordinate and pull together the grassroots. These are trusted activists that are now going to be deployed and just unleashed for the election, which is awesome. And it's a huge resource. And it gets us back closer to where we were, a decade ago when you had all of these other outside groups, the NRA, the chamber was Republicans then.
Yeah.
Things were different a decade ago.
Remember that.
Remember the days.
What a weird thing that was.
It's important, though, that you mention that because I don't think for your average Republican voter, they understand how much of those institutions have atrophied on our side over the last decade. And it's been dramatic, and it's definitely impacted our ground game ability.
Yeah, the NRA,
right,
the U.S. Chamber, a whole bunch of grassroots organizations that ultimately either, the NRA is still where it's at, but they went through some challenges.
That's right.
Chamber became a Democratic organization.
And to your point earlier about like trusted local activists and stuff, when you're talking about grassroots and ground game, like having those relationships, like you can't just solve for that, with money. Like you need people who you can trust.
That's it.
Are going to get the right data back into your app, that are going to actually walk the doors, that are going to get you the block walkers or the precinct captains and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, like that is real infrastructure that you need to start early.
And it takes time, right? It takes a lot of time to build. I call it trust equity, right? It's the trust that you have with the person over time. And then it's the equity because then you're going to ask them to do something really intense, which is I'm going to ask you to go talk to your neighbor about what their plan to vote is.
Right.
And
which is a daunting thing for a lot of people.
Especially in this day and age because everything is like,
I don't want to cause a problem
5,
with
and, you can't talk about this.
I'll just post another post on Facebook and that'll solve the problem.
Right.
Then you walk up and you see MSNBC in the window and you're like, Jesus, this is having to call Jess. This is a heavier lift than I was asking for.
But we got to get back to that, guys. Like, think of how the left operates. They have never taken politics out of their kitchen table.
Yeah.
It's part of it. Planned Parenthood and being pro-choice is just part of being a Democrat. It's your way of life. You're in the union. This is how you vote. You talk about it. For us, we're like, Thanksgiving can get rough.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about, if the election was rigged.
That's not our position on the variety program.
Right.
Yeah.
Like people don't do it.
Yeah.
You need to put it back. Like we're already talking about the issues, add in the voting component.
Yeah.
And then let's do it with our communities. Let's make sure we have the technology that's in place so that we can make it really easy to talk to everybody in our neighborhood about it. And then can you imagine an app where not only can you know how people vote around you, but then you know if your neighbor requested their absentee and haven't turned it in yet.
Mm-hmm.
And
you guys got that?
That's what we're building.
Wow.
And then you can go over and you can say, hey, John, I saw that you haven't turned in your absentee yet. I'd like to help you. I'm able to collect your ballot because I'm a ballot harvester.
I couldn't help but notice.
Right?
Yeah.
My neighbor's John. I'm sure he voted. I'm sure everything is fine. But like, that's the expectation that we're going to make. And we're going to walk Sentinels through this. We're going to, anyone that wants to help and that is committed to this, we're going to train them. We're going to help them do this well. And this sort of like grassroots relational organizing. It's why Ossoff won in Georgia. I mean, the left has been doing this, and it's about time we did it on the right.
What's amazing what you've been able to build in such a short period of time, because essentially you've sort of stood up this cycle. I mean, the need this cycle is greater than it's ever been. But you guys are really like an incredible story of success for the cycle after just, I mean, ostensibly launching like last spring, right?
Yes, and the reason is because I think everyone is so tired of losing, and we're kind of at our wits' end. Like, if we don't start doing things differently, we are going to keep getting the same results.
Yeah.
And so lots of credit goes to some amazing senators. Senator Bill Hagerty of Tennessee has fully embraced the need for long-term permanent infrastructure. He's made it a part of the NRSC's entire program for the outside effort. He went to Senator Daines. They've got a great relationship. He knows how to prioritize this in the field. That's helped a lot. And then just having an incredible team of Sentinels that we can pull into the election space now. It means we're not starting from scratch. So I like to think, we're a startup, but we're not starting over, right? Like we're trying to build on the same sort of fierceness of Tea Party accountability and grassroots work, and actually bring it into the election space to get the right guys elected.
How frustrating, this is a little bit of a difficult question, how frustrating is it to you when you see the conservative side of things, a whole bunch of people saying they've got the solutions for it when you've been in the field and you've done this for as many years as you have, and they're basically selling snake oil?
Yeah.
And like, how do you work with people other than, people who know you and have a relationship and have dealt with you? They know. But there's millions of people who are throwing a lot of dollars at operations that ultimately will not end up on that field. It's got to be frustrating.
It is. We call it the grift.
Yeah.
Steer clear of the grift.
Right.
Look, people need to do what they say they're going to do. That's kind of my rule of thumb. Like, if you say you're going to do this, then you got to do it. And usually you can smell the grift because they don't actually spend the money they get. Right? So all of this stuff is disclosed.
Yeah.
Super PAC spending, you have to disclose it all.
Yeah.
Government regulates it very, very heavily. So you can know pretty quickly, like, are people doing the things that they said they were going to do? Are they actually spending the money, or are they keeping it?
Yeah. Well, we need to start doing that in the program. We need to keep track of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because I think in this area in particular, it is super important because TV ads, you either see them or you don't.
That's right.
Right? Digital ads, you either see them or you don't. A whole bunch of campaign components, whether a candidate's traveling or not, you see it or you don't.
That's right.
Ground game is that invisible piece that your neighbors know about that ultimately doesn't show up on anything other than just sort of an amorphous FEC report. So it's accountability here is the biggest deal.
Yep, and you got to audit the auditors, right?
Yeah.
As you go through the program, as you go through the effort and you go through the programs, like actually having 30-day check-ins, actually auditing the doors that you've gone to, having spot checks, having accountability throughout it. I mean, this is why I like the team that we've been building, is because they're all business people. And so they're used to running an effort that is highly transparent.
It either has a result or it doesn't.
Yeah, and look at the ROIs, right? Like, that's the other thing. If you want to see the best return on your investment, if I'm a donor and I have, let's say, $100,000 to give this race, do I want to give that $100,000 to a television persuasive ad or to a get out the vote effort?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell you, you can get a better ROI for the dollars it takes to turn out a voter than $100,000 on a television ad. Do we need both? Yes, absolutely. Do we need the messaging component? Do I think that the NRSC and others are going to do that well? Of course. But having that ROI for actual door knocks and that door to door of getting a person to turn out and vote, and especially if we can get them to vote early, then they cost less, right? Because if you vote...
And it's in the bank. It takes the subjectivity out of it.
That's right. And then I don't have to spend money for the next 30 days getting them to turn out on election day.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, we've been a big fan of your work for a lot of different years. And I know the guy in the end has a lot of thoughts on your husband.
Well, he's got a great golf game. And he's just a tremendous fella.
He's a keeper. I'm going to keep him around.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad. Listen, Jessica Anderson, thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us, much success. If people want to help you out or get involved, where do they go?
SentinelActionFund.com. I also started a Substack, which the kids tell me is really cool and hip and like where things are at. So I got a lot of thoughts and analysis on Virginia on my Substack.
Good.
So you can check that out or follow me on Twitter, Jess Anderson 2, for all the hot takes.
Jess, thank you so much for coming in here. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.